Oh, hold on. Okay, we're ready. We're good.
Chairman, we're live.
Okay. I'd like to bring this meeting to order, Water Development Commission meeting workshop. March 18th and then tomorrow the 19th. Today is the Thursday, March 18th, 2021, 1:30 p.m. I don't know who the secretary would be to be local. Okay, go ahead, Ron. Can you do the roll call?
Okay, thanks, Vice Chair. Clinton Glick,
Here.
Ron Cayley, the secretary's here. Mark Cott,
Here.
Sheridan Little,
Here.
Larry Suker,
Mr. Chairman, Larry Suker is excused. He called earlier today.
okay. Rodney Wagner,
Mr. Chairman, Rod Wagner is no longer on the commission.
no, I didn't have him struck yet, you're right. Bill Yankee,
Here.
new members Lee Craig,
Here.
Bob Choma,
Here.
did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
Thank you. And Lisa Anselmi Dalton. Lisa Anselmi Dalton,
Oh, she just joined.
She will be attending.
She just hopped on.
There she is.
Director Gephardt?
Hi, Commissioner Anthony Dalton. We just did roll call and they just called your name, so.
Oh, okay. I think some of us were in the wrong waiting room. Some, like the Commissioner Whalen, is also in the wrong waiting room. So I'm going to go tell them on my other computer that they are. Or that you guys have to go to a different link. Do you need a different link, Commissioner Whalen?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's see. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Anthony Dalton, I believe she's getting ready to provide public comment for one of the items, so she would be admitted when that item is up.
Is she gonna just?
Okay, they're just in the. Are they in the? They're just in the waiting room. Commissioner Whalen is in, and is. Okay. Okay, they're just waiting. They'll wait to comment then, I guess. So, okay, thank
She'll be
you.
admitted when that item is up.
All right. Sorry about that.
okay, Mr. Vice Chairman, we have everybody, the roll call is finished and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, I guess we can move on to the legislative update. Director Gebhardt and State Engineer Lanning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I might make one recommendation if that's okay with you. We've got 3 new commissioners. Would you want to offer them the opportunity just to introduce themselves quickly?
Can you tell us what their names are? I really don't know yet.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We've got 3 new commissioners, Mr. Bob Choma, Mr. Lee Craig, and Ms. Lisa Anselmi Dalton. Mr. Choma, if you would like to just give a brief introduction to the members.
My name is Bob Choma. I live here in Star Valley, Wyoming. I've been here for over 25 years, and it's an honor to serve on the commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Craig, would you like to give a brief introduction?
Certainly. I live in Powell, farm up here with my family. I've worked for U.S. Department of Agriculture for quite a few years before retiring from that and farming full time. It's all irrigated farm. Most of my knowledge is irrigated agriculture. Other than that, I'm not able to attend this meeting by the Zoom, so you can't see my face. You'll just have to accept that I'm a handsome guy, and because I don't have a camera on my computer screen. Thank you.
You paint a lovely picture. Commissioner Anselmi Dalton?
Thank you, Director. My name is Lisa Anselmi Dalton, and I live in Rock Springs, Wyoming. I lived here basically my whole life. I did work as an attorney for a large law firm for about 10 years. I'm in the hotel business, so I really am not a farmer rancher, but my husband does have a bison ranch in Nebraska that's on their homestead property. So I guess I can call myself the Green Acres part of that equation. And so I'm happy to serve on the Water Commission. I was on Select Water in my senatorial duties, so I'm happy to continue on in this role and look forward to working with everyone.
I'd like to thank y'all for taking your time to come on the Water Development Commission. I'm sure you'll bring a lot of knowledge and experience to the table. And I guess we do know one of them, Mrs. Anselmi Dalton.
Commissioner Glick, maybe it would be beneficial for you guys to provide a quick introduction to the new folks as well. Just a brief, just explain who you are and.
Okay. For us.
Yes.
All right. My name's Glick. I live in Fort Washakie, Wyoming. I worked with water for over 25 years. I was previously on the Eastern Shoshone Northern Apple Tribal Water Engineers Committee. I used to work for BIA for water distribution, and I worked for Wind River Environmental, which was water quality. And I lived on a ranch my whole life, and we're cattle producers. Right now I work with Public Health Emergency Response Coordinator for the Shoshone Tribe, Mr. Yankee.
My name is Bill Yankee. I live about 10 miles south of Lander on the Lumpopozia River. I suppose the way I got involved in water was as being an irrigator, and I got involved with our local conservation district and served on that board for 2 terms. And we started a watershed improvement district and just stayed involved in water from the agricultural end of it.
Yes, my name is Mark Cott. I live in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and I worked as past 38 years for Sweetwater County, both in county engineering and in the county planning department. Thank you.
I guess I should say sorry for calling him Mr. Yankee, but he used to be my teacher. He's Commissioner Yankee. Sorry.
Yeah, we weren't going to tell anybody that because that might make me look older, but Clint was a child genius and graduated from high school when he was really young.
Commissioner Kaylee?
Yes, I'm Ron Cayley. I've been on the Division I committee now for about 2 years, coming up on my 2nd year anyways. I was a Laramie County Commissioner for 4 years, and I have 40 years of water and wastewater experience with the Board of Public Utilities here in Cheyenne. And I'm happy to have been secretary for the last year, and it wasn't a burden. So if somebody else is looking for it, but thank you.
I guess we should do the introductions for the audience.
We've got maybe one more Commissioner Little.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought I'd get out of it. My name is Sheridan Little. I represent Water Division 2. I live up around a little town called Lighter, Wyoming, which most of you probably don't know where that is. It's about an hour east of Sheridan. We have a cattle sheep ranch and quite a bit irrigated hay ground too. My experience, I'm 34 and believe it or not, the senior member on the commission. So. That's my introduction.
Thank you, Sheridan. Can we please have the introductions for the audience? We'll start on this side here.
Jason Mead with Water Development Office.
Riley Taylor with the Water Development Office.
Ryan Duncan, Water Development Office.
Chase Valley Water Development Office.
I'm Greg Lanning, the state engineer.
Steve Wolf with the State Engineer's Office.
Barry Lawrence, Water Development Office.
Jody Pavlika, Water Development Office.
Darren Cliff, Engineer's Office.
David Gray, Water Development.
Thank you. Are you ready to move on to the update?
I'm finally ready, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Gephardt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first item, well, third item on the agenda is a legislative update. I'll provide a legislative update as it pertains to water development. And then Mr. Lanning, State Engineer Lanning, will come and provide an update on some of the things that harmed or helped him. So the first one I'll talk about, House Bill 1, Senate File 1, that's the state budget. As you're aware, it's been kind of a difficult year for state government, but I'm happy to report that water development really has come through pretty well. We were not part of, because we are a special funded agency, we are not part of the supplemental budget. Our agency wasn't. But if you remember, we did take steps to reduce our budget. And we'll get into a staff report later in this agenda, but we are down several positions, and I'll explain those later. And then we've reduced travel costs to help participate in the cost savings for the state. There are some amendments that do impact us to these, to the budget bill. The first one is a House amendment to the budget bill, House Amendment 3014. And what that does is it funds the Interstate Stream Division of the State Engineer's Office out of Water Development Account 1. The impact that has out of Water Development 1 is roughly $633,000 a year, or biennium be about 1.2627 million a year currently, based on their existing budget. So currently that's going through the discussions right now. It did pass the Senate, or it did pass the House, and it was referred to Senate Appropriations, and I don't know if anything happened today on that or not, but that is what's going on with that. There was also an amendment. It failed in the House Committee of the Whole. The proposal of this amendment was to take a one-time funding of $1 million out of Water Development Account 2 and give that funding to the UW School of Energy Resources for hydrogen production research. That, like I said, that failed. So currently that is out of the budget. So other than that, that's our how we were involved in the budget currently. The next bill I'll talk about is our omnibus water bills for planning and construction. These were the bills that we approved, the commission approved in December. All the projects, so all the projects that we're talking about today to sign contracts for today and tomorrow, those all came out of these omnibus water bills. Couple highlights for the, we'll start with the planning bill. We did have an amendment in the legislature. Essentially what that amendment did is it removed the Lander Ditches Rehabilitation Project out of the bill. I think I tried to make everybody aware that that was happening when it occurred. Ultimately, the sponsor did tell the WDO staff that they would conduct the study on their own. And so that's where we stand. Other than that, the planning bill was as presented and approved by the commission. The construction bill, it had 3 amendments to it. 2 of them were just clerical and needed. So They were fine. The third one, the third amendment, this is an amendment that we discussed in our December meeting. And this was our contract with the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities for the excess stage 2 and stage 3 water. The commission did approve that, but because of the timing, it had to be amended during legislation. So that was the amendment in that bill. Other than that, it was as approved by the commission. One thing that if you remember correctly, one thing that was in the construction bill was some language was added to the small water program. It was approved by the commission, but we have some topics later on in the meeting that we'll be talking about that are a result of this amendment. And really what it does is it does not require small water program sponsors to provide their 41-day notice at the end of a construction project unless the sponsor determines that it meets the definition of a public work. And that public work is in statute. But really what this does is it puts the burden on them to decide whether it's a public work or not. If it is, then they continue to follow the 41-day advertising period. If not, then they do not have to give that notice and we can close the project down. So we've got some changes that we would need to make to the criteria to get that up to speed so that we can be consistent with statute. We'll talk about that later today. Another bill that we are involved in that is going through the legislature right now is House Bill 67, and it's titled Geothermal and Hydro-Related Energy Review. Essentially what this does is creates a task force to evaluate potential geothermal, hydroelectric, and hydrogen energy resources in the state. It was some years ago that they did something very similar with nuclear energy. They use that kind of as a template for this bill. So what it means to the Water Development Office is that we would have somebody on that task force to assist in that effort. Another bill that doesn't directly impact us, but one that we're watching is House Bill 188. It's irrigation district loans. And really what this is doing is allowing irrigation districts to secure or to apply for a loan from the State Land and Investment Board. Currently, a lot of these districts don't have a place to get loans other than through us. The intent of this, I believe, is to just allow another avenue for them to try to get some funding. Another one that we're watching that does not have a direct impact on us, it may have indirect impacts on some of our sponsors, but it's House Bill 72, and it's transfer of water and sewer district operations. And what it does is it allows a city or town to assume ownership and operation of a water and sewer district. Now, there are provisions of how and when they can do that. But we do have a lot of our sponsors are these water and sewer districts. So if this passes, it could have an impact on ownership of those districts. And I can't think of any other bills that we're involved in at this time. So I'll turn it over to State Engineer Lanning and let him describe what they're involved in. And Mr. Lanning, if you wouldn't mind putting your camera on. And
I think they invited me in already.
okay, so you're on.
Mr. Lanning,
Thank you.
good to see you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee or commission. I appreciate being here. Do I do anything with the mic, Director
I
Gebhardt?
think you're good.
I'm okay there. To begin with, Director Gebhardt mentioned the budget and the omnibus bills in particular, and the fact that Water Development's a self-funded agency, and his effect or the effects on the agency related to their budgets. And then I applaud his reductions that he took, notwithstanding, but the heart and soul of the reductions as a result of revenues lost at the state of Wyoming almost a year ago now led to three-phased reductions that the general funds had to go through in particular to try to ameliorate a $900 million budget deficit or revenue shortfall at the time. That's since been revised or updated with another revenue report since then. And so the picture wasn't quite as bleak as it was before. But we were well on our way to these reductions from the executive side on the general fund through phase one reductions, which were to take last year's budget and try to curtail spending as much as possible. There were certain restrictions on contracts and the beginning of a hiring freeze, which is still in effect today. Phase two reductions then were the first 10% for the general funds. And that was a full 10% as far as the general fund portions of the state engineer's office were concerned. And that was about $1.2 million in reductions for our office. Brandon mentioned, or Director Gebhardt mentioned a bill currently before the legislature in terms of funding one of our divisions, interstate streams, to the tune of about $1.2 million in the biennium. The water development funds already fund our, what we call our board of control portion of our budget already, and that's on the order of $15 million, roughly speaking, in a biennium. So water development fund already funds a portion of our operation. Phase three reductions then were to be 10% in the beginning, but as a result of the updated revenue report, that turned into 5% reductions in our general fund, or roughly half of that 1.2 million, or about 600,000, to the state engineer's office. So overall, that was 6 positions that we lost. We used to be 120 employees total, including our board of control, and which is now 114 employees. Over the last 10 years, that was from 148 employees now down to 114 employees. So over 10 years, quite a bit of reductions. Not that this was the latest. I mean, this is the latest and most severe reductions, but there have been reductions over the several years now for the state of Wyoming agencies. So that gives you a little idea of what, yeah, I think those are the highlights. I need to mention a little bit real quick. We have what we call the electronic heart and soul of our agency is what we call e-permit. And so if you needed a water right application or wanted to do searches of water rights and water right applications, you'd go to e-permit. You can come into the office certainly and get all the help you need, but most of our action today is on electronic. And so funding for e-permit was also cut during this process. And that's probably as big a highlight as the reductions in staff. And so you'll probably hear us in the future talking about what we're going to do about e-permit. E-permit evolved over a period of 15 years to the tune of about $12 million to get us where we're at today. The rehab or the update of e-permit might be, you know, another 4 years and $5 or $6 million, for instance. Just guessing. As platforms change and security requirements, software support, those kinds of things are expensive. We're not the largest by any means in the state of Wyoming. There's some very big systems they're talking about at the legislative level related to the highway department, for instance, on the order of $100 million, for instance. And they're expensive, similar systems throughout the state. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the last year's been for us in terms of general fund reductions. We've had listed on this agenda, there's a couple bills starting with Senate File 32, which came in the very early version of as the legislature met January 12th for one day. They lined up some business and then they came back a little later and had a 1-week session and several bills made it through at that time. Senate File 32 was one of them. And after having led in with the budget discussions, Senate File 32 was brought by appropriations, joint appropriations. And what that was a bill that addressed advertising costs for our agency in particular. So sponsored by appropriations to help us reduce our costs, to help us with our budget. I thought that was very appropriate and generous of them to sponsor that bill. And therefore, when it comes time to, for certain cases related to advertising, instead of registered mail, we can now, depending on the circumstance, it read, by the way, exactly registered mail. There's registered mail, certified mail, and then regular US mail. And I learned more about that than I ever knew before. Registered mail can be very expensive, on the order of $15, for instance, for a 1 ounce package, $5.50 for certified mail. And what are stamps today, 52, 55 cents, something like that. And it could mean a lot depending on the activity. So appropriations helped us on that bill, and we certainly appreciate that. That it amounts to about $5,000 a year in savings to us, but it helped. Also then is House Bill 45. That was a bill that we worked through the summer. It was a select item or a topic for, as a matter of fact, we've discussed this bill before, water development before, along with select water. It's also subtitled Orphan Water Rights. And that's what happens or may occur when urban development develops over the top of existing irrigated land that might have very senior rights. And as a result of that, sometimes occasionally the water rights underneath are orphaned as a result of that. They get lost in the mix. And they're very senior rights. And so it benefits all of us to resurrect those and put them in a place where we can use them. It especially helps us in when downstream court decrees or compacts call on water. Very senior rights generally do not have to turn off or be regulated as a result. So the more we can activate and get those old senior rights going, the better. This House Bill 45 had to do with advertising also. It can be very cumbersome and difficult to get these orphaned rights advertised to the appropriate parties, and it has to be brought by the affected water users. So this one, in this case, saves the water users, the citizens of Wyoming, costs related to advertising also. So a small start on, there's more work needs to be done for orphaned water rights, but at least this gets us started down the path. We'll probably have that as an interim topic again this summer, depending on how select water looks at that. More recently, you can find on file, Senate File 135, and that's an interesting one. That's a, let me see if I can find its catch title real quick for you. Just so we have the appropriate. It's entitled Water Rights Livestock on Federal Land. And this one was crafted quite a few years ago. You can find draft bills of this back in 2011, but also discussions back in the 1970s related to this. And this one in particular came back on the table because of in concern of, for instance, the federal government and federal lands and the moratorium or the restrictions related to oil and gas development and leases on federal lands, for instance. This one kind of mirrors that in terms of water, and it helps define better, perhaps, the relationship between the federal government and the state government in terms of water and water rights, and this one in particular for livestock watering. We had and do still have memorandums of understanding with U.S. Forest Service as well as the BLM related to how they can apply for water rights and ultimately use those water rights. This, in my mind, this bill kind of codifies that, if you will, to use the term, what those memorandums of understanding already address. Now, one of the MOUs expires next year, for instance, and then the other one with the BLM in 2 years. And so rather than having to renegotiate these will be in statute to be referred to. So that's Senate File 135 related to stock water on federal lands. Director Gebhardt made one last note on legislation related to again, the catch title on this one is let's see, University of Wyoming Water Systems. And this is House Bill 198, is that correct? And that one's kind of interest to this commission in particular because you had looked at a few years ago and funded some water development for the University of Wyoming to develop and water some of their, not only the golf course, but other parkland, non-potable water uses in and around the university, which overlaps or is within the city of Laramie's boundaries as well. This bill is still active, still being, I'm sure it's still active, I believe. I haven't looked lately, but defines better the relationship between the University of Wyoming and the city of Laramie as to who owns water systems, how you can build water systems within the city and this kind of thing, and how the university can develop that water in particular for the new well development that they just completed last year. That's House Bill 198. And Director Gebhardt, I think that's all I've got unless there's any questions. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody, or does anybody have any questions? Thank you for your information, Mr.
You're welcome.
Director Gebhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on to project updates. And I would make an announcement now. I'm not doing a very good job of watching the screen to see if any of the other commissioners have questions. So I would just suggest that if you do have a question at any time, just unmute yourself and ask the question and try to get it answered as best we can. Mr. Chairman, under project updates, the first update I'd like to provide is the Aladdin well. And I know that we have a couple of folks signed up to testify to the Aladdin well. So if we can let them in, and I'll start with my update as Riley's letting them in.
No one is actually here.
Crook County, Commissioner Whalen.
They're not on.
Okay.
You might ask. Can somebody Dalton emergency talking to?
Yeah, I saw them on the other one, so I wonder if they're just still confused. Director, let me see.
They be signed up for the other meeting, Riley?
Yes, so I don't know if we could.
I can check.
I saw
Excuse me, Jason, can I get a notepad from you?
Sure.
Thanks.
Could they have joined under the name Fritz or Huntington?
I'm sorry, Riley?
Could they have joined under the name Fritz or Huntington?
Let them in and we'll see if that's, we'll ask them.
They were signed under commissioner name, showed it. I don't know where they went to because they were in the, I think I was in the other meeting and I can't find the link now. Sorry.
Gebhardt, are you guys gonna give them a call? Is that how you're gonna work it or what?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we can do one of two things. We can take a short recess and try to get them involved, or I could perhaps jump to one of these updates that I do not expect somebody to participate in, if we have any.
You want to take a short recess? Okay, we'll take a short recess.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Come back in what, 10 minutes? Time with it. We'll be back at 2:16.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
unmute us. And I'm going to start my video. You can't see me yet. It's oh, that looks different. Several different people. It should be. I'm sorry, we must have been in the wrong thing. I apologize for that. It should be. Yep, I think you can see us and you can hear us, right? Okay. Thank you. Because our name was Alfred, so they didn't know who that was. But they can hear us now. Okay, cool. We can't hear them. Well, they're not saying it. Oh, now they can hear us.
All right, we're ready to rock and roll.
All right, thanks, Riley. Go ahead, Director Gebhardt.
Thank you. As I said, the first project update is the Aladdin well, and we have people in attendance. Would you, people in attendance, would you mind just unmuting and introducing yourself before I get started?
Or not. Oh. Wayland, and over here is Randy Strader, who is now the chairman of the Aladdin Water District. To my right is Wilma Tope, who is now the secretary on the board of the Aladdin Water District. I also have my assistant clerk, Melissa, in here to do all the technology.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, the Aladdin well, we've had some discussions on this project in the past. It's time for an update to let you know where we are. As you will remember, or for the new commissioners, I'll try to give a very brief history of what this project was. It started in 1993 with a level 1 project, and the reason for looking at performing a level 1 was to provide better water quality and better water quantity for the area up around Aladdin. And the level 1 and then subsequent level 2 projects were really looking at somewhat of a regional system, a small regional system, to include some of the rural water users up there. And so in the level 2 project, Water Development funded the drilling of a well. The well was drilled, completed, and as that was progressing, some of the users decided not to connect. As some of those users were dropping off, the costs started escalating. And the level 3 appropriation that we had was to construct the transmission pipeline and connect all of these users. But because of the interest declining, that level 3 project was never completed. And so the appropriation sat dormant for a period before it finally reverted. But I believe it was in 1998, the Aladdin district approached Water Development about selling water to the district. At that time, legislation was passed that allowed the commission to enter into a water service agreement with Aladdin. We did enter into that water service agreement, and we've had a couple of extensions on that water service agreement. And so the most current water agreement that we have with them will expire in July of 2021. In 2018, the office presented to the commission the concept of transferring the well or selling the well to the district. The commission approved that, and so since that time, we've been trying to work with Aladdin to be able to sell the well to them. We were close to having that done, and then I believe some of the funding fell apart with whatever funding source they were trying to get. That kind of fell apart. So we continued with these water service agreements with the thought that we'd still like to sell the well to the district. The district, the board had some troubles keeping all their members until very recently. They do now have a new board with a full board with new members, and they're working to get everything back up to speed with their board and trying to correct any deficiencies that they may have had with their board and the district entity itself. In 2018, the EPA did a sanitary survey of their system, and they identified essentially 3 deficiencies. And Water Development wasn't aware, or at least that we know of, we were not aware of these deficiencies until I believe in February of 2020, where we were named on the notice of violation. The reason that we were named is we're part of the system because we own the well. That's all we own. The rest of the distribution, the tank, the metering is all on the district. But because we own the well, we were part of that notice of violation. When we received that notice of violation, we worked with the district who hired somebody to come out and start correcting these 3 deficiencies. The deficiency that we're involved in all of them, I guess, but the deficiency that was associated with the well was a sanitary seal on the well itself. That has been corrected. The EPA has acknowledged that deficiency is corrected. There were 2 other deficiencies. One has to do with the tank drain. That deficiency has been corrected. So we're really down to 1 deficiency that the district continues to work on. And I believe that they're working on that currently and hopes to have that deficiency corrected as well. So that brings us kind of to the current. So the board, as I mentioned, has some new members, and they're working with the county commissioners. They may have had some deficiencies in their board as far as being up to speed with county requirements. So we do know that the county has provided a list of requirements to the board that they're working to resolve. And I believe that the people participating in this meeting can expand on that if they would like. But really, that's where we are. We've kind of given them some time to take care of some of these issues and get their feet under them. But our desire is to still sell them the well at some point to get everything resolved. EPA and the county commissioners will continue to work towards that. One thing that may have to happen in the May meeting, because our water service agreement expires, we may have to extend that service agreement for another year, but we'll bring that to you in May. So no action at this time for this project. I just wanted to provide you an update. I would stand for any questions on the project, and if there are none, we can turn it over to the public comments if you would like.
Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just one question for our director. What's the 3rd deficiency?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Cott, the 3rd deficiency had to deal with requirement that the tank vent and overflow had to be separate pipes. And I believe that well, I could maybe let Randy answer that, but I believe part of that has been fixed, but there's still a concern with some of the overflow that they're still trying to correct.
Do you want me to comment on that?
Please do.
Okay, the riprap right now, currently working with Mr. Langletter with the EPA on approving a rock base. What happened, we put the overflow valve in. The overflow deal was measured 12 inches, but they noticed that there was just concrete underneath that were paver blocks. That's not allowed. So I'm currently, today I'd made a phone call to everybody to try and get everybody on the same page to put rock in the trench so there's no sloughing. I need to know angles, degrees, stuff like that, but that's in the works.
Anybody else have any other comments? Director Gebhardt?
Mr. Chairman, I believe, did somebody raise their hand in the conference room? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Whalen. I wanted to let you guys know that due to those deficiencies, not having a board, not having minutes submitted, et cetera, to meet the county standards, 2 weeks ago, we started the process to dissolve this district. We did a hearing. That hearing will be continued in April. We do not want to take this water away from this board. These people, most of these people in this district have only purchased this property within the last 2 or 3 years. And what we are hearing today is stuff they may not have known about. So we do ask that we have some time for them to get up to speed to see how this thing runs. Right now, they don't have any minutes to go by. They don't even know where the transmission lines are or anything. They are literally starting from scratch. I believe our commission will allow them to continue on to learn how to do this with a timeline of 1 year. So Director Gebhardt, I heard you say you would extend the water agreement for a year. I think we could maybe coincide with that. That could give this new board of people who inherited this problem time to get started on to address the issues that need to be addressed. I don't think anybody expects it to be completely taken care of in 1 year, but I think that's a good start.
Thank you everyone for your comments. I have one comment or one question myself is when was the water agreement going to be extended? Was it in May, is it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we did not bring an amendment to the agreement to this meeting, but we likely will at the May meeting.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question for our director. Just explain one more time the relationship. Okay, a board's going to dissolve. Is that what I understand? And who are the players in this?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, what you heard, I believe, is that the board met with the county commissioners with the threat of dissolving the district. That is, I think Ms. Whalen mentioned they're willing to work with the district to allow them time to correct their deficiencies. And so that could coincide with an extension of our water service agreement. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
There's not any other comments. Want to move forward, Director Gebhardt?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The next project, and as we set this up, Riley, if you would allow the Laprelle and probably Pete Roush into the meeting. And Aladdin, thank you for your time and your interest. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to speak. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, the Laprelle Irrigation District Rehab Project has been on every agenda we've had for the last year and a half, and will likely continue that. So familiar faces, familiar project. For the new commissioners who may not know, this project is it's essentially a failing dam outside of Douglas. We did some level 2 studies on this project and determined that there were potential deficiencies with the dam, and subsequent studies that we have conducted, basically the consulting engineer has determined that the dam has reached its useful life. So we have continued to work towards resolution of whether to rehab or to replace this dam. I believe this is probably just the dam related studies. This is probably the 3rd or 4th extension to continue this work. And what we will be presenting to you tomorrow is another basically task. But if you remember in the omnibus water bill, and in December, the commission approved a request to the legislature of $4.3 million. And at that meeting, we discussed that $4.3 million, we estimated that would get us to a 30% design, performance some geotech analysis, some permitting, but would not get us to the final design of the project. But we also discussed that with that $4.3 million, that we would treat these amendments as kind of a task order type approach moving forward. So tomorrow we will have an amendment along those same lines. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is the recommendation as it's written now has two potential amendments. Only one would be approved, but we came with the idea of, do we want all of this one or part of this one? We had some meetings earlier this week, and I think in my mind, my recommendation was solidified on what I would recommend to the commission for funding. I'll back up a second. So we'll have, we presented in the e-notebook two amendments. One was for 194,000 and the other was for 134,000. One of the items that we're talking about is called the project management plan. One amendment includes it, the other does not. But as I mentioned, my recommendation has been solidified. Basically, given, if you look outside, you can see how white we are here. We got almost 3 foot of snow. I'm guessing that up above this dam, they may have gotten up to 5 foot of snow or more. So my recommendation is to the commission would be to approve an amendment for the whole 194,000. What this is going to do is to continue with the design and the permitting. It sets up the geotechnical program, allows them to do some geophysical work. And we're also continuing to secure outside funding. Working with the district and the engineers and our staff to try to find funding for the ultimate solution to this. We anticipate that in May, we will be coming back for another amendment. When we're dealing with these dams, money goes fast. But we've got a lot of moving parts right now. And part of the moving parts that we have that we're trying to tiptoe around is some outside funding source applications that we have and that we're working on. We're trying very carefully not to get too far out into potential additional funding so that we would jeopardize that. We've got an application into FEMA for the Building Resiliency in Communities Fund. We're trying to leverage as much of our 4.3 appropriation as we can to these other funding sources. We're talking also to the NRCS about some PL 566 potential grant or potential funding also. So we're kind of taking this piece by piece by piece rather than just cutting them loose on a 4.3. I do think that we have a plan, critical path, and maybe not all the detail filled in, but our consultants, they do see a finish line through this plan. But as I mentioned, we're going to continue to go piece by piece because of this potential other funding and making sure we're not trying to jeopardize that. So as I mentioned, tomorrow my recommendation is going to be for the full 194,000. Come back in May with another request to keep this project going. Going to see if I had any other thoughts on that. Yeah, the biggest thing that I'm seeing in this is to get this 194 allows us to be nimble, particularly with this heavy snowpack that's sitting above this dam. I do know that it looks like Colt Rodeman from the district, and I believe Pete Roush and potentially Corey Foreman are on the line. Gentlemen, is there anything you'd like to add?
Can you introduce yourselves? I think you're stuck on mute.
Okay, we're unmuted now. Cool. Colt Rodeman, alongside me is Phil Dargell and Anna McClure. We did receive some snow, Mr. Gephardt. However, it's not as much as we would like to have thought. We're sitting at 50 inches with a water equivalent of almost 9 inches. And in a really good year, 7 inches is what it takes to fill the dam. So we're still kind of on the dry side because everything is so dry. But that's where we're at right now. However, we're still doing our snow dances, everybody, so be ready for it. Anything else?
I might just add, the unknown is how that 9 inches is gonna come out and how quickly. So that there is still that concern.
Yeah. You know, we went into this year extremely dry. Everybody was dry. We were extremely dry. Those mountains are extremely dry. So you don't know how it's going to come out. I mean, if we have 4 foot on the level and we get 3 inches rain on top of it when it's starting to melt, then yeah, it's going to flush. But if it comes out slow, we may not see a drop. You just don't know. There's no runoff right now, just to let everybody know. Here in Douglas, we got over 20 inches of snow out of this storm, and there's absolutely no runoff. It's all going in the ground right now because we'd gotten warm enough to where what little frost that was in the ground came out, and it's all going in the ground. It was a $1 million snow in my opinion, but that's my opinion.
It's like that almost everywhere across the state.
I figured it was.
Thanks for introducing yourself. Give us a comment. Director Gebhardt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know that our consultants, Respect and potentially HDR, guys, do you guys have any comments? If you do, please unmute yourself and turn your video on.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Director Gebhardt. No, we don't have anything specific to add. Yeah, appreciate continuing to move forward with this.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that if any of the commissioners have any questions for either myself or the district or the engineers, please feel free to ask.
Anyone have any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one, I think, direct to Director Gebhardt. We had a meeting on December 18th, online meeting, and the main purpose of that meeting was to request the commission to authorize the office to look at federal funding specifically for this. And so I just wondered, was that what FEMA and NRCS, did that refer specifically to that, or are there other possibilities that we're looking at for federal funding that would apply to this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Yankee, yeah, we continue to look for other funding sources. These are the two we've identified. As I mentioned, we have applied to FEMA BRIC. We will know more probably in June of where we stand in that priority. We compete nationally for that. And then even if we are successful, that money is not going to be available until late fall of this year. So we feel that it's important to continue on with what we can while still trying to save that money to leverage as much as we possibly can. Hence the reason for these baby steps, if you will. It's kind of a pain for the consultants and for you and us, but I think it's the right way to proceed personally.
Is there any more comments or questions from anyone? Director Gebhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cole District, thank you. Pete, Corey, thank you. Appreciate your time. Mr.
Thank you very much.
The next update I'd like to provide is the Levitt Reservoir Expansion Project. I don't know that we are anticipating anybody to participate public on this, so I'll just provide a quick update on this project. We are progressing fairly well with this project. We're nearing a 90% design submittal from the consultants to us. We anticipate that probably within the next month or two. We have, so this project, it's a little different than a normal construction project. The design is being handled through a planning level appropriation, through a phase, level 2 phase, whatever planning level. So that design has been appropriated and it is progressing. We've appropriated $46 million for the construction management of this project as well. We have signed an agreement with the sponsor. So we're under contract with the sponsor for the construction of it. They are working through the consultant to develop an agreement for the construction management phase. That's slightly different than the design phase. Normally, those would all be under construction, but this particular case, they're separated. So they're working through the through an agreement to secure the construction management phase with the consultant. And I bring that up because when we provided the recommendation for the 46 million, it was actually a $41 million appropriation originally, and then a $5 million addition, I think last year, the year before. But with that, we had an estimate in there of what the construction management fee would be. And at that time, that estimate was $3.3 million for construction management. Because of our criteria and where we are with the design portion, our criteria allows a 20% amount for final design and construction management. We are honoring that with this contract, and so what the construction management is working towards is likely to be to use that full 20%. So it's likely to be that contract between the sponsor and the consultant will be more than what we estimated in our appropriation. The money is still appropriated for it, so we're going to continue with that. And if we need to, at some point, if the bids come in high, we still have our account 3 contingency pot of money. So rather than dip into that and ask for the commission to approve that at this time, our recommendation is to continue on with staying within this $46 million appropriation, allow them to meet their 20%. And then if we need to, when the bids come in, we would take a one-time approach to look at that contingency if need be. We don't even know if we need that yet or not. So I just wanted to make you aware that the estimate is being exceeded, but our 20% criteria is still being met. So that's the biggest update on that. We will have 2 amendments to discuss tomorrow for this same project. And these are on the planning side, not the construction appropriation, but the planning amendments. And really what we're doing with that is one of them is a name change. Our consultant, or the permitting liaison consultant that we have, Wank, was purchased by Stantec. I think we mentioned that at the last meeting. So this amendment will fix the name change. But what we're also doing with this, with these amendments, is we have some unobligated appropriated money. So money that was appropriated for the permitting and design that was never contracted for or obligated. These amendments are going to move those into a contract. So we're going to recommend amending our permitting liaison $75,000 to allow them to continue. And really what we see that being used for is we're working on an adaptive management plan as part of the permitting requirements. And then we're also likely going to use some of this funding to identify wetlands and delineate wetlands associated with some of the ancillary work. And we may use that to really, the goal is to minimize any future mitigation for wetlands and environmental impacts. So trying to use that money to save money, essentially. And then also the other part of this money, we're recommending that we increase the final design contract. And really what we're doing with that is we have a discretionary task in that contract. We've been using that discretionary task to keep going and try to make things better. So we're actually trying to replenish that with this $200,000 amendment request tomorrow. That'll go towards, we're currently doing some easement acquisitions and negotiations. There may be some changes to those. So allowing the consultant to help us with that. And then also we'd have that money available that if there are potential design changes that could be made for cost savings, that's what that money would go for as well. So that is my update on Levitt Reservoir. I would stand for any questions.
Any questions or comments? We'll move on, Director Gebhardt.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the next project update is the Little Snake Supplemental Storage Level 2 study. And I believe we probably have Mr. Bob Davis and potentially Don Arnell. If you could admit them, please, Riley. Mr. Chairman, I'll start with the update on this. This project has been around for quite some time. It became a little bit dormant for a while. Some things have occurred and we're picking the project back up and progressing with this project. But really, what we'll be asking for tomorrow is an extension to a current contract, time extension only, nearing its expiration date. And so we're going to request an extension for another year and a half on that. And also to, again, this is Wank, so we'll be correcting the name change because of the acquisition on that as well. But really, to provide a little background, in 2013, a planning appropriation was granted by the Wyoming legislature to complete some water quality analysis, update some hydrologic modeling, some stream gauging, allowed us to procure a NEPA liaison. That's the amendment that we will be presenting. And then to complete some permitting and some final design. Also in 2018, a request was made to legislature for construction funding of this project. It was a fairly significant price tag at that point. The legislature at that time approved of just under $4.7 million appropriation. That appropriation had some caveats that essentially some of the beneficiaries in Colorado, it requires them to pay a pro rata share of some of this work. But what I really want to point out is the work that we're progressing with right now is off the 2013 appropriation. We're being very diligent to make sure that the work that we do it follows the statutory limitations that we may have under that. But the work that we're continuing is under this 2013 appropriation. And then another thing that happened just last year in 2019, the Little Snake River Conservancy District in combination with the Pothook Conservancy District in Colorado applied for some federal money for funding. They were successful in that. It's through the NRCS. I believe it's the PL 566 funding again. So they have brought $1.25 million in a 50-50 grant match mix. So that basically, I believe in legislature it was described that Colorado is contributing because they're bringing that money. So, but that is, so for our appropriation that had that stipulation on it, that was part of the $6.22 million appropriation, or excuse me, the $4.7 million appropriation. Just to be clear, we're progressing with the prior appropriation and using the statute language in that to continue on. And really what we're looking at right now is we're working with the conservancy districts, our permitting liaisons, and the Forest Service and the NRCS and the Army Corps of Engineers. And really what we're looking at is the best way to start with the NEPA, trying to identify what NEPA is required, and looking at potential, whether the preferred option would be for a land exchange between the state of Wyoming and the Forest Service to secure the land for the dam site. And then that would help define what NEPA would be, or would it be a special use permit through the Forest Service, and what that permitting environment would look like. So that's really where we are right now. We're meeting with these agencies and trying to pick the best path forward and start in on the permitting for this project. I'm sure I butchered that, but if there are any questions, I would try to answer that.
Is there any questions or comments from anyone?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do one. So when we hear the term West Fork, that refers to this project, correct? West Fork Reservoir is this project that we're talking about.
Exactly correct. Yeah, that's it. And Mr. Chairman, I see Bob Davis is joined us. I don't know if he would like to have any comments or not.
Please introduce yourself.
Director Gephardt and Commission, I don't really have any comments. I think you pretty well summed it up. We're just, due to the COVID last year, we're a little behind on this stage that we're at right now, but we're trying to catch gears and get caught up and have a very busy summer with this NEPA process.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Davis? Thank you. Director Gephardt.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Next update I'd like to provide is the Palisades Water Agreement. We've had some conversations with this water agreement in the past. This has been going on for almost a year now. This would be to replace a current agreement that we've got with the Idaho Groundwater Water Association. It's a water service agreement to sell water to the IGWA, we'll call it. But this agreement replaces that one. As we discussed previously, it replaces a readiness to serve type of a contract with more of a full take water service agreement. We're offering up to 10,000 acre foot per year if the water is available. The reason I bring this up is I don't believe that we need commission approval for me to enter into this agreement, but I just want to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. So I am going to ask for authorization to sign the agreement at tomorrow's meeting and then proceed. And then the state engineer is also a signatory to this as well. And I believe that the IGWA has agreed to the terms of the contract, so it's just a matter of us signing it and getting the signatures, and then we should have a fully executed agreement. So I just bring that up to remind you of the discussions and see if there are any questions prior to tomorrow before I ask for authorization to sign.
Thank you. Lisa, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering, I thought that the contract started on January 1st of 21 when I read through it and goes to 12/31/25. So, but we're not signing it till now. It's March 18th.
That is probably a pretty good catch. I don't know that I noticed that. Our current contract goes through December 31st of 2021, so we're still operating under that. We will work to get the date changed on that, and I'll probably ask for authority to sign based on that condition.
Could you follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had another quick question, Director. I was just, when I read through it, I just wondered, let me see where my notes were. Sorry about that. that they had something where we had indemnity if, for replacement fees. But if they didn't pay the administrative fees, we didn't have indemnity. And I didn't know, are the administrative fees usually low versus replacement fees? Is that why there's an indemnity clause in that part of the contract versus in the other part? It's just that, I just was wondering why.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Anthony Dalton, I might have to bring up and put Darren Cook on the spot on the implementation. And
Do you come up to the front here?
okay, what I'm hearing, Mr. Chairman, is Darren's counterpart, Chris Brown, was involved in setting this up. So we will work on getting the answer to that question for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Anthony Dalton. Is there any other questions or comments? Okay, Director Gebhardt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next project update, small water operating criteria. We bring this to you because we're going to request a change to our operating criteria tomorrow. This request will be to not go through the public comment period that we normally do. We are allowed to change criteria without public comment, but I believe it's been the commission's preference to give public comment when we can. The reason for our request is really all we're trying to do is make our criteria coincide with some statutory changes that occurred in the omnibus water bill this year. Really what has changed is in the omnibus water bill, it changed a previous statute that required the 41-day advertising period. And we mentioned that earlier today. Really what this is doing is updating our criteria to coincide with that language in the omnibus bill. So I will read, and I believe it's on page 5 under paragraph F9 of the small water program operating criteria. I will just read the original and the change. It says, upon project completion, WWDC funds will be dispersed when a certified bill is received from the sponsoring entity, including statement of completion, before and after photograph, project long coordinates, and what is being stricken is the affidavit of publication documenting the required notices of final settlement were published pursuant to Wyoming Statute 16-6-116. And that stricken part is being replaced with coordinates and an affidavit of publication documenting final settlement as required under Wyoming Statute 16-6-116 if the sponsor determines the project meets the definition of a public work as defined by Wyoming Statute 16-6-101, numerat IX. So really what we're asking is to amend the criteria to coincide with the changes in statute. And as I mentioned, the commission is not required to go to public comment on these changes. We're recommending that we do not. This is just a change to coincide with statute. So we'll have that conversation again tomorrow. Are there any questions on that?
Are there any questions or comments? I can't see the screen. Okay. Well, it looks like there's no questions or comments. Thank you, Director Gebhardt. tomorrow, I guess we'll have more discussion on the, what is it, not,
Small water operating criteria.
so we don't have to have public comment, that's what I was getting at.
Right. For this case, we're asking that we forego the public comment. We will be in our August meeting when we typically, that's the one meeting where we bring changes to our criteria to the commission. And then typically we go through a 41-day or 45-day public comment period and try to get all the public comments when we start making these changes. But because this is only to address the statute change, we feel comfortable that there won't be any issue with it. In fact, we've heard from the County Conservation District boards that they are in favor of this change. It was well received. It basically, what it's doing is it does not, if it does not meet the definition of a public work, then they don't have to do a 41-day advertising notice. Those notices cost money. They have to put it in advertisements in the newspapers. So if it doesn't meet those requirements, then they do not have to do the notices in the paper and pay for the notices. So that's really the only thing that is changing.
Thank you. Director Gebhardt, move on to the next agenda.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, my last update is a brief one. I just wanted to update the commission on our current staff. As we discussed the budget bill and some of the, I guess, somewhat voluntary reductions that the office took, and where we stand with those as far as staffing. Right now, office-wide, we are down 4 positions. We are down 2 positions in construction division, 1 in the dam and reservoir division, and 1 in planning. We are still under a statewide hiring freeze, but we have asked and were granted the ability to advertise for one of our construction positions. So we are currently advertising for one of those positions. We'll get through the legislative session, see how the budgets work out, and kind of reevaluate when the dust settles, and see what else we're going to do with these vacant positions and what we're allowed to do at that time. I also wanted to, I believe we had it in the December meeting, but Jody Crane did retire. We thanked her for her dedication and years of service. And she is one of the 4 positions that we are down haven't filled yet. Just wanted to provide you that update.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments for Director Gebhardt? Thank you. Director Gebhardt, I want to move on to number 5.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to turn the hot seat over to Barry.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. If you could turn to tab C in your notebook.
Tell them what your name is for the new.
Excuse me, Barry Lawrence, Deputy Director for Planning, Water Development.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Tab C in your notebook, you'll find a list of applications that we received by the March 1st deadline. We received 8 applications for planning studies this year, and that includes applications for water master plans, exploratory well studies, a watershed study, and the diversion structure rehab. And we're going to discuss each of those projects in great detail in our May meeting, so I'm not going to spend much time here today. But what I did want to mention is kind of our process and the timeline. I know we have some new commissioners, and Brandon is sharing the planning project funding approval and consultant selection schedule, which is a 13-month process. And so I'm going to walk you through that a little bit here. On the left side of the chart, you'll see that is the start where we actually accept those applications, which we've done. And as I mentioned, we have 8 applications this year. And then as we work it across the timeline, right now, those applications have been assigned to project managers in our office. And over the next few weeks, they'll be going out, doing site visits, and then writing up recommendations based on those site visits after going out and seeing the lay of the land, seeing what the situation is, and visiting with the various sponsors and so forth. I should mention that the site visits are actually in our operating criteria that we will do those project site visits. So that is going on for the next few weeks. We'll get those recommendations put together. And as I mentioned at the May meeting then, we will have a thorough discussion of each of the projects. You'll have a recommendation before you. You'll have a project manager here that did that evaluation and so forth, as well as we will have the sponsors in attendance, either virtually or in person, to talk to you about those projects. And we'll walk through them. And what we'll be seeking at the May meeting then would be a request for approval to begin consultant selection on those projects. Okay. So coming out of that May meeting, and then as you'll see the chart here as we're going along, first thing that happens right out of the gate after we have that May meeting, we start soliciting interest from consultants in those projects. And so that would mean asking for statements of interest, statements of qualification from various consulting firms. And there's a whole process we go through to do that, not only through a website, but we have email distribution and so forth. And then we obviously advertise in the state paper. Go through that process. It's about a month-long process to get those statements of interest, statements of qualification. We do follow Wyoming Statute 9-2-1031 when we go through that procurement process, having to do with the selection of professional engineers and surveyors. So we go through that process, collect that information. Our project managers then do the shortlisting. We try to whittle it down to 5 firms to continue the process with on each of these projects. So we do a shortlisting process. And then from that, RFPs have been developed. That's going on concurrently while we're doing the shortlisting. RFPs are developed for each of these projects and sent out to those shortlisted firms, at which time then in many cases we'll have site visits, again, for the consultants that are in the hunt, out there in the field so they can see the lay of the land again. And then we'll accept those proposals, and they get about a month to put together their proposals. And then we'll get those proposals in, then we have selection teams for all those proposals. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Those proposals are ranked. And then we do conduct interviews. And those interviews, typically we can get down to 3 firms that we would interview. And those interviews are conducted the first week of October in conjunction with our October commission meeting. So through that process, consultant selection, we would come out with a consultant that we want to go with, along with the costs. Those costs for doing those projects come in separately from the proposals. They're in sealed price envelopes, okay? So we don't look at that when we're doing the ranking of the proposals and all. It's separate, and it's married up actually at the interview phase. That having been said, we come out of the process for these 8 projects. We would have 8 consulting firms with prices for each of those jobs that would then get hardwired in to our omnibus planning bill for 2022. And we discussed that again in November as part of the big package for the planning and construction bills. That having been said, the whole idea here is we go through the entire consultant selection, it's hardwired into the planning bill, go through the funding process, obviously in the 2022 legislative session, and then hopefully we come out the backside of the legislative session, we'd be in a position to ink contracts with all those firms that are one of those jobs, and we get those to proceed right after that, okay? Now, I need to let you know that a few years ago, the process was a little different. We were in the legislature. I think some of you remember, have been here long enough, you know. A few years ago, the process was different. We were actually in the legislature at the same time we were doing consultant selection. But a few years ago, the commission asked us to move that up, move the process up, because originally we set the budget on the projects, as in project managers and our years of experience of doing that. Instead, they wanted what the market will bear. And so doing that, we had to slide our consultant selection process out about 5 months so that we get all the way through consultant selection before we got in the legislature, so we could hardwire it into the planning bill rather than us arbitrarily setting budgets, okay? That having been said, that's the process now. So we have a 13-month process. And all I need to tell you, when you think about a 13-month process, kind of bring it at home. Now, tomorrow, when we're at the meeting itself, you're going to be asked to approve planning contracts. Well, think about this. This is the planning contracts from that started that process, the previous process, 13 months ago, when March of last year, when those applications came in. Here we've done full cycle. And tomorrow you'll be approving those projects, those final consultant contracts. And today we're talking about the new applications. So if you see, we got a 13-month process, we got a little bit of overlap, and today is and tomorrow is what I call the overlap meeting. Okay, we get the tails are overlapping, and that's what's going on. Just put it in context. We're finishing up one process, we're starting a new process. Okay. Lastly, I would mention that several years ago, the commission asked if there was a way they could be more involved in the planning projects, a way they could kind of follow along and shadow the projects. And so what was developed was a process whereby we assign commissioners to projects. We typically assign 2 commissioners per project to kind of shadow the project as it evolves. And what that would mean would be, after we do the assignments, that the commissioners for that specific project would get invited to any site visits. And of course, that's optional if they can attend or want to attend or whatever. They would also receive the proposals for those projects when we're doing consultant selection. They would participate in the ranking of those projects and then also participate in interviews. And then when we got into funding and actually got the projects funded and to deal with the consultant, then at that time, they'd still be involved. They continue to be involved. And when the project's actually going, then when we have kickoff meetings and so forth with the district or the sponsor, whoever, they've been invited to those kickoff meetings. And then on the backside, a year later, when the project's completed, they would be invited to participate and be at the presentation of the final results. So that's the process that we follow. I should tell you that because we have 8 projects, that means basically if we assign 2 each, that means 16 slots we've got to fill. And since we have 9 commissioners, that means that we'll need 7 commissioners to take on 2 projects, and then we'll need 2 commissioners to take on 1 project. And that will fill our 16 slots. And we will be making those assignments, Brandon and myself. But one of the big things we need to know immediately is if looking at this list that you have on tab C, if there's any conflicts, if you perceive any conflicts with yourself on any of these projects, if there's any reason you don't feel like you could be assigned to any of these, that's something that we would need to know right away. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brandon if you have anything else to add.
I do not, Barry. You did a nice job. Thank you. You can feel free to grill Barry now.
Chairman, I do have one question. Barry, I know a lot of times in the past, you kind of given us an update of how the number of applications this year compares to the number of applications last year in your report. Could you do that?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Last year we had 13 applications.
I thought we had more.
We did have more last year. A couple things here I would mention. One, 13 applications. One of those projects, if you remember, now if you go back, fell out, was not eligible for our program. And so then that comes down to 12. We also did a consultant selection for an in-stream flow study last year, and we're yet to know whether or not we're going to have one of these this year from the Game and Fish. And so that might bump up the numbers to another one. But we're down a little bit, but that's not atypical from what we're seeing. I mean, if you think about the construction division, what they saw for construction applications in October, I think part of this obviously has to be pandemic related.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Oh, this is Mark. Mr. Cott. I have just a comment for Barry. Including the commission on these site visits is, just it takes your understanding from 0 to 100. I mean, it really opens up your eyes and makes the stuff in the book here make a lot more sense. So really appreciate that opportunity.
We appreciate it when you have the time to participate.
Does anybody have any conflicts with the list? Go ahead, Barry. Thank you, Barry. Director Gephardt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I see Craig trying to speak. Maybe not, but I would just to add to what Barry was saying, the conflicts under tab C is the list of projects. Doesn't have to be right now, but take a look and look at those and see if there are any conflicts and let myself or Barry know, and we can make sure to schedule around those. It's not a big deal if you do have a conflict or even a concern of a conflict. Just let us know and we'll put you on a different project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if you want to continue on, if there are no other questions, the last item on this agenda, we'll have a discussion for the summer tour and meeting. I will just inform the new commissioners that what we're looking at here is our August meeting is typically a traveling meeting. We have it at various spots around the state. We call that the summer tour. And last year, we were scheduled to go to the Wheatland area, and we were going to tour potentially the LaPrelle Dam, to take a look at it, and also the Wheatland Irrigation District Tunnel project that is currently under construction right now. I would suggest or ask the commission that if that would be your desire, we can reschedule that one. If you prefer to go somewhere else and look at other projects, that is fine too. I do still think that the timing is valid for looking at those two projects. One will be recently completed, and then the other one, you can get your eyes on what we've been talking about for 2 years at this point. So I would just offer that as a suggestion, entirely your choice as to what you may want to go, but we did miss that one last year because of COVID, and that's still an option.
Do you have any comments or questions for Director Gebhardt?
Mr. Chairman, I'd support that. I think it'd be great to go look at those big, really large, high ticket, high priority items that we've been discussing. It'd be a great idea.
Make our decision tomorrow, right? Or is that today?
We need a formal action on that or not. I think if we felt comfortable that the consensus was to perhaps go to Wheatland, that would give us the opportunity to start planning for that.
I think we need can we get a motion on that by somebody? And somebody don't, because she's on mute still.
Sorry about that. I would make that motion, Chairman.
Is there a second?
Just the way the discussion, what's the motion again?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we need a motion. I think if we had enough consensus that that's what we wanted to do, we would start planning accordingly. So I would just ask if there's any other preference for discussion. If everybody's in consensus that we want to go to Wheatland, we'll just start planning.
Yeah, well, I guess we could just take it the way that Director Gebhardt is going with it. The consensus, does everybody agree with that?
Good.
Okay. I guess everybody's in agreement, Director Gebhardt, to stick with Wheatland and then the tunnel at Wheatland. So Techwater Irrigation District and LaPrelle. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if we can work it in, we'll look at the logistics, but there may be an opportunity to go visit the Goshen Irrigation District tunnel collapse as well. So if we can work that in, we will. But we would put a priority on the diversion tunnel and the LaPrelle Dam.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other updates to provide. One thing that I would ask you guys to maybe consider tomorrow when we're looking at these projects. Somebody has a question?
No, that was me.
Oh, okay. Tomorrow, procedurally, one thing that you may want to consider, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of contracts tomorrow. And the way we've done these in the past is we've broken them into blocks and treat them almost as a consent list. I would suggest consider that tomorrow. We're not going to talk about each of the contracts specifically. We can talk about a block. But again, in terms of conflicts of interest, if anybody has perceived conflict or concerned about it, when we start talking about a block, just mention that in that block, and then we will pull that particular project out that anybody has a conflict on so that person doesn't have to vote. But it seems to work well to do a consent list type idea, and I suggest maybe think about that for tomorrow.
Pull out one and then vote on that separately.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or two or whatever it is.
Whatever it ends up being, that's right. So just letting the new commissioners know that if you do have a conflict, that's the way we can handle it pretty easily, and don't be bashful about declaring one if you have one. Won't slow anything down.
Does anybody have any other questions for Director Gebhardt? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
Second.
Commissioner Yankee so moves, and somebody down, second. All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same sign.
Aye.
Was that Commissioner, his name, Craig Choma, is that what it is?
Craig Lee and Bob Choma.
Craig Lee and Bob Choma.
Excuse me, Lee Craig and Bob Choma.
Lee Craig, Bob Choma. We'll get it here. Just give us a couple of meetings, we'll get it.
Just for planning, Mr. Commissioner, I would anticipate tomorrow that we should be done by noon. I think we can go through it and cover everything fairly quickly.
Thank you. Motion approved to adjourn. Thank you all for coming and attending the meeting. Hopefully we get done by noon tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll get it down on you, Dave.
You got it. You got it.
Still working at it.
You got